Picture this. You wake up one morning and see a $500,000 dock going up right smack in the middle of your private lake. No warning, no permission, just a power-hungry HOA president acting like she owns the whole world including the water. My grandfather left me, and as if that wasn't enough, she's putting up a $5 million cabin on my property without even bothering to ask. I knew right then. I couldn't sit on my hands and watch it all happen. And someone like her, she's not that type to back down. Maybe she won't. But what happens next? You're not going to believe. Let me know what you do. Drop a comment below. I'm curious. I'm Wyatt Mallister. I'm 39, and I stepped away early from my log cabin design business after selling the engineering firm I built. Let's just say I earned more than I ever thought possible. These days, I live solo on a secluded lake deep in the countryside, the one my grandfather passed down to me. The nearest neighbor is a good half-mile off. My life now, it's quiet, simple. I fish when I want. Read when I feel like it. I enjoy a stillness most folks never get. At least, that's how it used to be. Then one spring morning, I was jolted awake by the roar of heavy machinery echoing from across the lake. Not just a backhoe or two. This sounded like bulldozers, excavators, and a construction crew that belonged on a skyscraper site. Orders were being shouted, engines revved, and it was clear something big was going down. I rolled out of bed, threw on whatever clothes I could grab, and stepped outside to see what was wrecking the peace of my little haven. What I saw, I couldn't process it at first. A massive dock worth $500,000 rising out of the water. I honestly thought I was seeing things. I squinted, blinked, stepped forward. But there it was, shimmering in the morning sun like it belonged there. And to be clear, this wasn't some cute little fishing pier. This thing was colossal. Easily 100 feet long, 20 feet wide, tiered, and spacious enough to dock a yacht. It was crafted from high-end materials, pressure-treated hardwood, sleek stainless steel railings, the kind of build that probably costs more per square foot than most homes. And I'm standing there, pajamas on, coffee mug in hand, just watching it come to life in what's supposed to be my private water. The noise was deafening. The usual morning calm, the birdsong, the soft lap of water against the shore completely buried under diesel growls and hammering. And I'm just standing there thinking, what the hell is that thing doing on my lake? Because let me make this crystal clear, this wasn't public land. This is a private lake that's been in my family for 3 generations. The deed spells it out plain as day. No shared access, no community rights, just mine. Then I see her. Woman in her 50s, clipboard in hand, standing on the dock like she's commanding a kingdom. You know, the type, someone used to getting her way, with the smug confidence that comes from having deep pockets and thinking that makes you superior. The kind who barks at servers and acts like the universe should revolve around her whims. I chose to handle it like a grown-up. I walked around the lake to where the construction was happening, calmly introduced myself, and asked what exactly was going on. She looked at me like I was dirt under her shoe. "This is community waterfront now, sweetie," she said, using condescension. "I'm just making it beautiful for everyone to enjoy." I took a breath, explained that this lake is private legally mine and that she had no right to build anything into the water, and then she laughed out loud. Like I'd just told the punchline to the best joke ever. "You're mistaken," she said. "This dock has all the permits it needs, the HOA signed off. I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone." When she said everyone, the message was clear, she meant herself. Definitely not me. There was someone else there that day, though, someone who'd later become key. Rachel Doyle. She lived in a cottage between my place and the construction site. Retired teacher, probably around 60, kept to herself but always kind in passing. After the woman turned her back and walked away, Rachel came over quietly and pulled me aside. "I saw her burning some kind of paperwork last week," she whispered, glancing nervously. "Looked official. The flames were green like that chemical ink stuff they use on legal documents." I didn't know what to think, but I tucked that away. Rachel didn't strike me as someone who made things up. She noticed things, paid attention. Later that day, I stood at the edge of my land, staring at the dock stretching further and further into my lake. The crew wasn't wasting any time. They were building fast, like they were racing some invisible deadline. I kept replaying what she said, community waterfront and HOA approved. The gall of it all was staggering. She basically declared that she was claiming my lake and there was nothing I could do about it. One thought kept circling in my mind. She thinks this is over. She thinks I'm going to roll over, but I didn't know whether to follow the legal route or start playing by a different set of rules. As I walked back to my cabin, a nagging thought slipped in. What if she's right? The next few days, I buried myself in documents, everything tied to my inheritance. I studied property laws, riparian rights, water boundaries, anything I could find. And eventually, I found the answer. The paperwork was airtight. The lake, including every inch of water up to the central point, belonged solely to me. No wiggle room, no community clause, zero ambiguity, private, period. Armed with that, I got to work. I surveyed the shoreline, mapped out markers, documented angles, preparing for what felt like a legal war. At first, I felt ridiculous, like some cranky old guy obsessing over boundary lines. But the deeper I went, the clearer it became someone was banking on me staying quiet. So, I gave her one more shot to be civil. I wrote her a respectful letter, included the relevant legal documents, and explained the situation, that the dock extended into my property, and I needed her to halt construction immediately. I even offered to discuss a possible limited use agreement if she approached things with basic respect. It was more generosity than she deserved. But I tried. What I got back, a letter from her lawyer. Not just any lawyer either, some high-end city firm with letterhead that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. And the contents, they accused me of harassment. Claimed I'd intimidated her, caused her emotional distress, and demanded $20,000 in damages for politely asking her to stop encroaching on my land. I read it 3 times, each more surreal than the last. I'm the one causing anxiety. The woman invading my property with bulldozers is playing the victim. I sat at my kitchen table, stunned, wondering if I was in some upside-down world. But she wasn't finished. Over the next week, things escalated. She put up no trespassing signs all over the shoreline, even on parts that were clearly mine, according to every survey I had. When I called her out, she brushed it off as a mistake. Then came the security detail. Not your standard guards. Either these were the kind of guys you see at high-risk events. Tactical vests, stern faces, the whole 9 yards. They started patrolling the property. They even stopped me on my own land, demanding ID, asking what business I had there. As I was filming a section of the shoreline, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up. Didn't stick around long, but the message was loud and clear. We're watching. The final straw. She filed police reports, claimed I was stalking her. Never mind that she was the one trespassing, taking over my lake, and blocking my access. According to her, I was some deranged stalker who couldn't accept that she had the right to do whatever she wanted. Thankfully, the local cops saw through it once they visited and saw the truth. But that she'd even go that far lying to law enforcement told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about property anymore. This was a power play. A control game. I'd tried kindness, logic, diplomacy. I appealed to decency and fairness. None of it worked. It only made her more aggressive, more determined to bulldoze through me. I stood in my kitchen, looked out at the lake, and said aloud, "All right. You want to go this route, fine." I tried the neighborly thing. Now, we do it the hard way. I didn't yet know what that would look like, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her steal what my grandfather built. He poured his life into this land so it could be passed down, and I wasn't about to let someone entitled waltz in and take it away. As I continued combing through the construction logs and permit applications, I stumbled across something that caught my attention. Every one of her building permits had a section regarding waterfront construction consent, and every single one of them had been left entirely blank, not misfiled, not incorrectly completed, just completely empty. As if someone had either overlooked it or intentionally skipped it, banking on nobody noticing. It felt like a detail that could prove significant, though I wasn't sure how to use it yet. One thing was clear: if I was going to take on someone with her kind of money and influence, I'd need professional backup. That night, I checked the locks on my doors twice. I wasn't scared, exactly, just hyper-aware, like something in the air had shifted. Rachel ended up being far more helpful than I had first realized. A few days after our conversation, she showed up on my doorstep with a worried look and some new information that completely reframed how I saw things. "I've been thinking about what I saw," she said as she settled into a chair on the porch, holding a mug of coffee. It wasn't just her burning papers. I also overheard a phone call. She was shouting at someone about missing permits. I clearly heard her yell, "Just build it. I'll take care of the paperwork later." She was so loud, I could hear her from my garden. That was exactly the kind of evidence I needed. Rachel had witnessed her essentially confessing to starting construction without the proper authorization. I didn't want to get involved at first, Rachel continued. But after seeing the way she's been treating you, someone's got to speak up. She's been awful to everyone around here, acting like she owns the lake just because she bought a parcel beside it. Her words pushed me to dig deeper into the property deal that had brought this woman to our quiet lakeside community in the first place. This time, I didn't just collect facts, I filed a formal property boundary complaint. I referenced state laws, attached GPS overlays, and documented everything. What I uncovered was both enlightening and infuriating. The company that sold her the lakefront property was called Premier Waterfront Properties. Their business model skirted dangerously close to fraud. They specialized in selling lakeside lots to wealthy out-of-towners, making promises about water access and development rights they had no power to guarantee. Their method was simple: finalize the sale, cash their commission, and leave the new owners to untangle the red tape. In her case, Premier had strongly implied she could construct any kind of dock she wanted. What they failed to mention was that she'd need explicit consent from the actual lake owner before building anything that extended into the water. I contacted the county, and a clerk let slip that she had applied for a dock permit, but it was still pending, never officially approved. The more I learned, the clearer it became that she was both a victim of her own arrogance and the real estate company's misleading sales pitch. Premier had sold her a fantasy. But rather than face facts and try to make things right, she chose to bulldoze ahead, using threats and intimidation to silence any pushback. It seemed like she believed that if she acted confident enough and threw enough money around, she could rewrite the rules after the fact and make her illegal dock seem legitimate. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then I remembered the hired guards, the false reports to the police, and the way she dismissed my rights as though they were an inconvenience in her way. As my calm inquiries about permits became more frequent, she started showing signs of desperation, making bold moves to end the standoff on her terms. First came the bribe, though she never used that word. One evening, she showed up at my house with an expensive bottle of wine and what she clearly thought was an irresistible offer. "Let's be neighbors," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll even name the dock after your grandfather, the Harold Mallister Memorial Pier. Nice ring to it, right?" I told her plainly that naming rights weren't the issue and that she still needed my permission to build on my property. Her demeanor changed instantly. "You're making a serious mistake," she snapped, her voice suddenly icy and threatening. "I've got connections you couldn't begin to understand. People who could make your life very difficult if you keep this up." I stood there stunned. She was threatening me on my own front porch. That's when I realized this wasn't just a boundary dispute anymore. This was about holding someone accountable, someone who believed that wealth and power gave her license to trample over others. From that point on, I documented everything. Every conversation, every visit, every bit of construction. I bought a good camera with a zoom lens and took daily photos of the dock's progress, each one timestamped. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel it pop. I wasn't furious yet, but I was getting close. I kept detailed logs of the noise, construction hours, and any environmental damage. I filed formal complaints with every relevant agency: the county building department, the EPA, the water management district. Most of those filings vanished into red tape, but I kept going. I was building a paper trail that could matter down the line. What really struck me during all this was how completely she'd isolated herself. She'd been so aggressive, so unwilling to compromise, that nearly everyone had turned against her. Even the construction crew seemed nervous around her. Local officials were exhausted by her demands. Neighbors who might have been sympathetic were put off by her behavior. But I knew documentation alone wouldn't be enough. To beat someone with her kind of money, connections, and ruthlessness, I needed real legal help. The question was I willing to go that far? Was it worth the cost, financial, emotional, even years of my life, just to fight over a dock? Was this really about the shoreline anymore, or something bigger? Looking back, I probably already knew the answer, but at the time, I was torn. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was still a way to de-escalate this. I printed the full email thread and slid it into a folder. If she wanted a fight, I'd bring fire and a filing cabinet full of receipts. But finding the right attorney wasn't just a matter of flipping through the phone book. I needed someone with real expertise, someone who specialized in property disputes, understood water rights, and wasn't intimidated by bullies in designer shoes. After asking around and doing some research, I was referred to Russell Briggs, a seasoned lawyer in his 60s who had built his reputation on handling land use conflicts and HOA nightmares. His office was in a converted Victorian an hour from the lake, and the moment I walked in, I could tell this man understood the battlefield I was on. The walls were lined with framed news stories from past cases. Stacks of files suggested he was in constant demand. He went through my folder with a calm, meticulous eye, spreading out deeds, permits, photos, and emails across a massive conference table. After nearly an hour of going through everything, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Son," he said, "you've got what we call a slam dunk. She's building on your land without approval, ignoring formal notices, and filing incomplete permits. Any one of those would win in court, all three. This shouldn't even get that far." But then he looked at me with a serious expression. "Be ready. People like her don't back down easy. She fight dirty. She's going to try and drag this out and make it costly for you." Russell's legal plan was refreshingly clear. "We've got 3 solid angles," he explained, sketching out points on a legal pad. 1. Trespassing, she's building without your consent. 2. Violation of county rules, she ignored official stop work orders. 3. The waterfront construction permits are incomplete, so the county should have never greenlit the project. He figured a formal cease and desist letter would be enough to halt the build and that we could likely secure a court order to have the dock removed, avoiding a drawn-out trial. "You're legally in the right," he told me. "Now we wait and see if she's smart enough to realize that, or if she wants to make this ugly." The letter Russell drafted was a masterpiece. Gone was any sugarcoating. This was pure legal muscle, stating exactly what she'd done wrong, the consequences for failing to stop, and the financial penalties if this went to court. The message was crystal clear: halt all construction. Remove any structures built into the lake. Restore the shoreline. Failure to comply in 7 days would trigger legal action, including monetary damages and recovery of all attorney fees. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good reading that letter. After weeks of being cornered, it felt like I finally had the upper hand. But she didn't back down. Instead, she came back flanked by 3 men in high-end suits, standing at the edge of the dock with briefcases in hand. It was obvious. She'd hired a legal team. "Everything's been reviewed and authorized," she called across the water. "Maybe you just didn't read the bylaws carefully enough." One of her lawyers stepped forward and quietly handed me an envelope. It was a cease and desist from her HOA's legal team. "You've been formally notified," he said in a cool, matter-of-fact voice. "Any interference with the dock will be considered vandalism." I was stunned. They were actually trying to turn the tables, paint me as the aggressor. Word of the legal showdown started circulating throughout the community, mostly through local Facebook groups and neighborhood forums where people aired grievances and swapped updates. The feedback I received was overwhelmingly in my favor, with many people chiming in to share their own stories of HOA overreach and property conflicts. A number of them also mentioned unpleasant run-ins with Joanne since she'd moved in, and there was a strong sense that someone finally pushing back against her was long overdue. Oddly enough, the public attention seemed to rattle her more than the legal pressure. She was clearly used to getting her way through private intimidation, and it was obvious she hadn't expected her actions to become public conversation. That night, Rachel called. She'd overheard Joanne yelling at someone over speakerphone. "I don't care what the zoning map says, just stall him." Soon after the cease and desist letter went out, I noticed the construction activity slowed significantly, and the security guards vanished completely. I couldn't tell whether that was due to her attorney advising a pause, or if funds were running low. Russell warned me it was likely just a temporary lull. "She's going to come back harder," he predicted. "People like her don't back down quietly. She's probably already consulting with other lawyers, looking for an angle we've missed." And sure enough, the next morning, I discovered my mailbox had been smashed clearly with a baseball bat, and there were tire tracks running through my lawn that hadn't been there the night before. There was no direct evidence pointing to Joanne, of course, but the message couldn't have been clearer. Legal threats alone weren't going to make her back off. I documented the damage, snapping photos and adding them to my growing file. If she wanted to take things beyond the courtroom, I was prepared. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, was this just the opening move? What did she plan to do next? The following morning, I found a letter left on my deck. The HOA accused me of trespassing on my own shoreline. The media interest began almost by chance. A young journalist, Sean Everett, had noticed the chatter about the dispute on local community forums and thought it might make for a compelling story. Sean, probably around 30, worked for the regional paper and had that eager look reporters get when they've sniffed out something good. He approached me one afternoon while I was out photographing the dock for my records, introduced himself, and asked if I'd be open to sharing my side of things. "This has all the makings of a David versus Goliath story," he said. "I think people would want to hear your perspective. Would you be okay with me writing about it?" I wasn't sure how I felt about drawing media attention, but I figured that getting the truth out might pressure Joanne into finally doing what was right. But before Sean even had a chance to write the piece, Joanne tried to take control of the narrative by going straight to his editor. She didn't realize Sean had already spoken to me, so I heard about her interference right away. Apparently, she called the newspaper's office and made a not-so-subtle threat, reminding them that her HOA was a significant advertiser and hinting that running anything unflattering might affect their relationship. I found myself pacing, murmuring legal codes like mantras. I'd hate to see our advertising agreement suffer because of poor editorial choices. She'd told the editor, according to Sean, maybe your reporter should focus on uplifting local stories instead of stirring the pot. I was stunned by her audacity using ad money to suppress coverage of her own unlawful actions. It felt like a move destined to backfire, and it did. Sean's editor wasn't impressed with her threats. He told Sean to move forward with the article and to be thorough. Meanwhile, I submitted a formal complaint to the Department of Natural Resources for illegal shoreline modifications. When the article was finally published, it exceeded my expectations. The headline read, "Local Man Challenges HOA President Over Family Lake Rights." The story laid out the facts plainly and without bias, making it easy for readers to see who was in the wrong. Sean had clearly done his homework interviewing community members, reviewing documents, even capturing photos of the dock in progress. He included Joanne's failed attempt to block the story, which only made her look worse. Mrs. Carl declined to comment for this article, it concluded. However, she did contact the paper's advertising department to express concern about the coverage. I planted a sign at the dock that read, "Unauthorized structure, under review." If nothing else, it unsettled them. The public reaction was swift and heavily in my favor. The online comments were full of people venting about similar experiences with HOAs and property issues. "This is exactly why people despise HOAs," someone wrote. "They think they can do anything they want." Another person said, "Good on this guy for standing up to her. These HOA bullies need to be checked." Dozens more echoed that sentiment. Several even shared their own stories about Joanne since her arrival. Reading those comments was deeply affirming. For the first time, I questioned whether I'd been naive in assuming reason and rules would prevail against people like her. The publicity had a noticeable effect on Joanne. She seemed to unravel under the scrutiny. A few days after the article went live, I ran into her at the grocery store. She marched up to me in the parking lot, clearly distressed and unaware or uncaring who might be watching. "You're destroying my reputation over a stupid lake," she snapped, loud enough that people stopped and stared. "I've put everything into this project, and now you're ruining me with your lies and media circus." I kept my cool and told her simply, if she didn't want bad press, maybe she shouldn't have built illegally. But she wasn't hearing it anymore. Earlier that week, a neighbor had offered help, saying he couldn't stand the HOA either. That night, I noticed his truck parked by Joanne's garage. What she didn't know was that Rachel had also been at the grocery store that day, and when she heard the shouting, she started recording with her phone. The video showed Joanne in full meltdown mode, screaming while I stood calmly trying to de-escalate. Other shoppers could be seen backing away, clearly uncomfortable. When Rachel posted the clip online with the caption, "HOA President Loses It Over Lake Dispute," it was shared hundreds of times in just a few hours. The comments were even harsher than the ones under the article. She's clearly unfit to run anything, someone wrote. Another said, look how composed he stays while she's shouting. That tells you everything. With my background in engineering, I hadn't just been watching the legal situation, I'd been paying close attention to the actual construction. The project looked rushed and slapped together. It was obvious they were cutting corners. The foundation pilings didn't seem sturdy enough for our storm seasons, and overall, it didn't look compliant with the codes I knew. I sent a message to the county's building inspector. The pilings appear inadequate for winter conditions, I wrote. This could pose serious danger to both workers and future users. I recommend a full engineering review before more work is done. The inspector responded politely but said a formal review would require a request from the property owner. Naturally, Joanne wasn't about to request something that might bring her project to a halt. As summer slid into fall, I couldn't shake the sense that the coming storm season might decide this whole thing for us. That night, the wind started picking up. It felt like we'd moved beyond permits. Finally, after weeks of pressure and documentation, the county launched a formal investigation. An inspector came out, spent hours at the site, and uncovered numerous code violations and permitting issues. Joanne was served with an official order. All construction must stop immediately pending compliance review. A bright notice was posted at the site, and for the first time since this started, the work stopped completely. You'd think that would be the conclusion, but Joanne wasn't done yet. She brought in a high-powered attorney from the city to fight the county itself. It wasn't just me she was battling now. Even members of her own HOA began questioning her decisions. Rachel attended one of their meetings and reported that tensions were high during what should have been a routine conversation about landscaping. One resident stood and said, "Joanne, this lake situation is embarrassing. Everyone's talking about it, and it's reflecting badly on the entire community. Why not just take the dock down and move on?" Joanne responded by shutting down any further discussion and threatening anyone who brought it up again. "This is an internal HOA matter," she said coldly, "and anyone who doesn't like the board's decisions is welcome to move." That kind of response only alienated more people. Her support within the HOA was crumbling fast. Within a day, a local blog posted a headline, "HOA dock encroaches on private lake." I didn't think much of it until a regional news station picked up the story. Comments poured in, and by the next morning, a dozen kayakers paddled out just to get a look at the infamous dock. One guy even live-streamed the shoreline, narrating it like a crime scene. Realizing she was running out of both legal and political leverage, Joanne made one last desperate move. She showed up at my door one Sunday morning looking nothing like the confident, composed woman I'd met months ago. Now, she looked drained, anxious, and for the first time, sincerely vulnerable. "Wyatt, please," she said, her voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "I've put everything into this, the cabin, the dock, all of it. I can't afford to lose it now. What would it take for us to find a solution?" I told her exactly what I'd said from the start: take down the dock, restore my shoreline, and issue a public apology. She looked like I'd asked her to cut off a limb. "I can't do that," she said softly. "It would ruin me. There has to be another option." That week's weather forecast was dominated by reports of a massive coastal storm developing. Meteorologists called it a perfect storm scenario, with winds projected to hit 70 miles per hour and storm surges potentially impacting inland areas. Residents near lakes and rivers were advised to secure any loose structures. This storm could cause major damage, warned the Weather Service, especially to any builds not properly anchored or up to code. You'd think I'd feel triumphant, but in truth, I was exhausted and paranoid. If they could claim my shoreline wasn't mine, what else could they try to twist? I thought again about those weak pilings, about the warnings I'd sent to the county, and I realized this storm might reveal more than anyone was ready for. I made one final effort to prevent what I feared was about to happen. I sent one final email to Joanne and the county. "The dock isn't built to withstand a major storm. I advised immediate removal or structural reinforcement before the weather hit." Joanne didn't respond. The county claimed their hands were tied due to the ongoing lawsuit. "So I ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you try to protect the dock, or let nature have the final say?" Rachel sent me a clip from a recent HOA meeting. Joanne's voice came through the recording, sharp and dismissive. "If the permit's not valid, I don't care. Just give us 2 more weeks and a storm. That'll take care of everything. The storm arrived on a Tuesday night near the end of September, just as intense as the forecasters had warned. I'd spent the day battening down my own property, but beyond that, all I could do was wait it out. Winds picked up around dinner time, and by midnight, they were howling like something out of a nightmare. Rain lashed the windows in heavy sheets, hitting so hard I thought the glass might shatter. In the distance, I heard trees crashing down. Around 2 a.m., the power cut out, but the worst noise came from the lake. The waves were massive, bigger than I'd ever seen, slamming the shoreline with brutal force. Every few minutes, there was a loud snap or groan. I was almost certain it was coming from Joanne's dock. This is it, I remember thinking. Nature's about to make the decision for all of us. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a different kind of sound, a long creak, followed by a thunderous crack like timber splitting in two. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the window facing the lake. But the rain was too thick and the darkness too deep to see anything clearly. I could barely make out the outline of the dock. It looked like it was still intact, but something was clearly off. The whole structure moved in a way it shouldn't, rocking with every wave, as if its anchor points had come loose. I stayed there for maybe 20 minutes, trying to make sense of what I was seeing through the storm. Was this finally the end of Joanne's unlawful dock? Looking back, I should have known, once Mother Nature steps in, she doesn't hold back. The real question wasn't whether the dock would survive. It was how much of it would still be there when daylight returned. I stood on the porch, clouds sweeping over the lake. Joanne's dock groaned beneath the waves. The storm was on its way, and this time, it felt personal. When the sun finally rose and the storm had moved on, I made my way to the shoreline to see the damage. What I saw was so surreal, I stood in disbelief for a good while before my brain could process it. The dock had broken loose entirely, now drifting in the middle of the lake like some extravagant, rogue piece of driftwood. The structure, worth $500,000 and so stubbornly defended, was now gently bobbing in the water, completely detached and slowly floating toward the stream that links our lake to the broader river system. "Oh my God," I said, aloud, though no one was there to hear. It actually happened. Deck planks and rail fragments littered the surface, along with patio chairs and other floating debris. It looked like a shipwreck, except instead of a boat, it was a confused dock pretending to be a houseboat. Later that afternoon, I untied the frayed mooring rope that still loosely held the dock to a rusted post. I didn't cut it. I didn't tamper with anything. I just let go. Left it to the wind and water to decide. By morning, it was gone. All that remained were ripple patterns and scattered bits of driftwood. Joanne showed up about 30 minutes later, frantic, heels sinking in the mud as she yelled into her phone. Someone in a canoe filmed the whole thing. The video went viral under the title, "Queen of the HOA Loses Her Throne," 40,000 views in just 2 hours. An hour later, Joanne returned again, this time still in pajamas, hair wild, face pale. When she saw what had become of her dock, the sound she made landed somewhere between a wail and a scream. "What did you do?" she shouted, as if I had conjured the storm myself and ripped her illegal dock from its flimsy foundation. "What did you do to my dock?" I tried to explain, calmly, that I hadn't done anything but watch the inevitable unfold. I reminded her that I'd warned both her and the county weeks ago about the unstable foundation. "I told you it wasn't rated for storms," I said. "You ignored that," but she wasn't hearing any of it. "You sabotaged it," she kept yelling. "You ruined my life. You planned this." I almost felt sorry for her. Watching someone's dream literally drift away can do that. But it was hard to forget the months of threats, harassment, and shady construction that had brought us here. Later that morning, the county inspector arrived to survey the storm damage. His findings were unsurprising, yet damning. After reviewing where the dock had torn away, he confirmed exactly what I'd been saying all along. This was a structural failure, he told Joanne. The anchoring wasn't designed for a storm like that. He showed her my emails and formal complaints, each one clearly predicting this outcome. "These building codes exist for a reason," he added. "This dock should never have been approved with the foundation it had." Joanne didn't say much after that. She just stood there, staring at the broken remains of her investment, making soft sounds like a wounded animal. By mid-morning, the fire department came to assess whether the dock posed any danger or risk to navigation. After reviewing marine safety guidelines and consulting with county officials, they decided salvage wasn't worth the risk or cost. The dock was officially declared marine debris, now drifting in a public waterway, and no longer Joanne's problem or her property. Local news chopper covering storm aftermath got incredible aerial footage of the scene. Rachel stood beside me, filming on her phone. "They're watching live," she whispered. I didn't smile. But I didn't look away either. That night, I watched the news. Seeing that massive dock drifting down the river like some rogue barge was both surreal and deeply satisfying. The anchor referred to it as $1 million dock turn floating disaster. Downstream boaters worried about navigation, but sympathy for Joanne was hard to find. With the structure gone and every violation documented, Joanne's legal standing crumbled. Russell explained over the phone that she was now facing enormous fines, cleanup fees, and possibly lawsuits from other property owners impacted by her dock. "She's broke," he told me. "The county's hitting her with $60,000 in fines. Her pricey lawyer dropped her when she couldn't pay. And she's responsible for any damage that thing causes downstream. Turns out, when you build something illegally with shoddy engineering, and it becomes a hazard, you're accountable." Who could have guessed? Within 2 weeks, a for sale sign popped up in front of Joanne's half-built cabin. She started with a high price, but slashed it 3 times as the financial pressure mounted. I watched from across the lake as moving trucks came and went, hauling away the remnants of her lakeside dream. The day she finally left, I saw her standing by the empty spot where the dock used to connect, silently staring at the water, where her 6-figure investment had last been seen. For a moment, I actually felt a little sorry. She'd made a string of terrible decisions, yes, but watching someone's future float away is still a hard thing to witness. Rachel came over while I was watching Joanne's departure. "Think she learned anything?" she asked. I thought for a second, then shook my head. Doubt it. People like her never think they're wrong. They just think they were unlucky. As Joanne's U-Haul disappeared down the road, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Real peace. I'm by the lake now, wrapping up this story, watching the sunset shimmer on the water and listening to the calm sounds I'd missed during months of chaos, bulldozers, and threats. No more machines. No more guards. No more HOA drama poisoning my home. Just the lake, back to its natural state. And the only boats here now are the ones I put there. Did I destroy Joanne's dock? No, nature did. Did I warn everyone what would happen? Absolutely. And I've got the receipts. Do I feel bad watching her dock disappear downstream? Well, Joanne's cabin still stands, but her dock, her pride, her illusion of control, that's long gone. And while I did feel a tiny bit sorry, it wasn't enough to make me regret standing up for my land, my peace, and my family's legacy. Sometimes bullies need to face the consequences of their actions, and sometimes the best teacher of all is nature herself. Because the best revenge isn't really revenge at all. It's watching people undo themselves with their own arrogance and poor decisions. That dock probably reached the ocean by now. And somewhere out there, a few confused fish are probably circling what's now become a $500,000 artificial reef. As for me, I'm still here, right where I belong, finally enjoying the quiet I fought so hard to protect. Later that evening, I sat at the shoreline, mist rising, rain tapping gently from the empty mooring post. The only sound, after everything, peaceful. Maybe that's the real message here. When you stand your ground, you don't need a big ending. Nature takes care of the rest. If you're still reading, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. And if this story resonated, hit that thanks button to support the channel. Catch you next time.